Welcome to the Moms for Wellness podcast on SM Enlightenment Radio or TV. This is a podcast for moms who are passionate about being healthy and leading their kids to do the same. Welcome back to the podcast, Mama. Well, do I have an amazing conversation for you, and I have a wonderful guest tonight. And our topic tonight is what the plant and human holobiomes mean for your health. And if you're like, "Holo, what did she say?" Well, just hang in with me because you're going to find out what a holobiome is and why it's important and the connection that it has to your health. It is going to be a fascinating conversation. And my guest tonight is Jennifer Maynard. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Jennifer Maynard is the CEO and co-founder of Nutrition for Longevity, a nutrition company focused on improved health span and disease prevention and management through food as medicine. After a successful career and spending 20 plus years in the biotech and pharmaceutical arena, she decided to shift pace and focus on food as medicine. This was after her job took her to many countries in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Through her travel, Jennifer experienced firsthand the difference that eating fresh produce and minimally processed food made in her health. After helping her father improve his health after his type 2 diabetes diagnosis by increasing his servings of veggies and increasing his walking, she realized the profound impact food has on health. This led Jennifer to focus on the area of nutrition that was so badly needed in the U.S. So she decided to take her science background and executive knowledge from pharma and focus her efforts on bringing food as medicine to life in the U.S. She met Dr. Valto Longo and appreciated the extensive research he had already done and continued to do in the longevity and food as medicine, and she wanted to be involved in that science and bringing it to life. And this was how Nutrition for Longevity was born. Nutrition for Longevity offers online meal delivery service and medically tailored meals from cancer to type 2 diabetes. For Jennifer, this is only the beginning with lots of exciting developments in the works. So please help me welcome Jennifer Maynard.
Hello. It's great to be on your podcast.
I am so excited you are here. This is going to be such a fascinating conversation, a lot because you have such a fascinating history and one that you're going to share, be able to weave in through what we're sharing today and what we're going to be talking about. And I'm sure we can probably end up off on lots of different tangents and maybe we will get there. That's okay. But I would love to start with the holobiome. What I mentioned in the beginning, I'm sure people are like, what the heck is that? So can you start by just giving us a definition of what is a holobiome?
Yes, absolutely. And this is something that I get really excited about because when I talk to groups, they're just blown away that only in the last 5 to 10 years have we even defined this term and understood what it really means to the human body and plants and everything in between. So the holobiome is the concept that we're essentially superorganisms as our plants, and over 98% of the genetic makeup of that superorganism is non-human. So when we're talking about a human holobiome, so we have 98% plus that's mainly bacterial, and that is driving some of our major functions of our body, from our main neurotransmitters like serotonin. 90% of our serotonin is created in our gut microbiome. So that's what makes us really happy. We know now that over 80% of our immune system is actually driven around our gut microbiome. They're calling it our second brain. So we're realizing that these organisms are driving so many different functions in our body, and they do the same thing for plants. And there's even an incredible interaction there. So the holobiome is just looking at that entire entity, not just the human genes, but all the genes that make us whole. And it's really incredible if you start to dive into it from a genetic standpoint, because they've actually, through the Human Genome Project, they've mapped, thousands and hundreds of thousands of human genomes, and they've realized 99% plus of our genetics, mine and yours, are identical, but our microbiota, the other 98% plus, is 80 to 90% different from one individual to another. And that's also what we're realizing is a huge determinant of disease. So it's also spurred the field of epigenetics. If you've heard of epigenetics, we're realizing that our DNA is actually very flexible. And it's because it's not just our own. We can draw on this holobiome for stress coping mechanisms to manifest our DNA in a different way. So that's kind of the overall concept of the holobiome, and why it's going to be really the leading field in science and medicine in the future, food as medicine being a key player, because we're realizing that so many factors around what we eat, even how we exercise, is impacting this overall holobiome and the symbiotic relationship that's required to keep our body in balance.
That is so interesting, because I thought that was a really beautiful explanation of so many things that we have talked about on this podcast in different episodes in the past, just even talking about autoimmune diseases and how it's different things that play, and just cancer and a lot of different things. People say, oh, well, is it just genetics? And like, well, genetics play a part in it, but your environment plays such a big part. And that gives me goosebumps, because that explains that environment piece and why that makes such a big difference, that connection there. So thank you for so eloquently explaining that and so clearly. So how would you define the soil holobiome differently from the human one? And if so, just what is that connection between the two?
Okay. So we actually parallel plant holobiomes to a human holobiome. There's so many similarities. And this is the Human Genome Project spurred off all these amazing projects. And one of them is to look at the soil microbiome, because they say that we understand about -1 × 10 to the 28th power. So essentially nothing about the soil microbiome. So we're physical beings. We like to, experience things and touch things and feel them. So the things that we don't see, we often ignore. So we know almost nothing about this incredible soil microbiome. But what we do know is really powerful, and it's literally unearthing, like so many amazing things. So the plant holobiome is similar. It's made up of all these subset microbiomes. So we hear about the gut microbiome a lot, but we have the air microbiome. You have about a foot around you, a little more than a foot. That's your air microbiome, as do plants. And you actually are making decisions, or your microbes are making decisions about the people you interact with before you even touch them. And so that fascinates a lot of people. So you have all these different microbiomes, which are these subsets of your holobiome. And so for plants, the one we look at the most is the Rhizosphere Microbiome. And that's where the root system interacts with the soil microbiome. And it's really amazing, because part of the holobiome of a plant is passed down from generation to generation through the seed. And the other is acquired through interacting with the soil. So the plant's interactions with the soil, it can actually select the holobiome it needs to survive into its future. And that's important, because humans and plants have been on the planet a lot less than bacteria. Bacteria have been on the planet for about 3.5 billion years. Humans only about 300,000. So there's a lot more knowledge, and people think that's weird to talk about knowledge from a bacteria, but it's hereditary knowledge that is passed down. These bacteria have been through droughts and literally ice ages and everything that we've never been exposed to, that we can actually draw on them for survival mechanisms. So plants do the same thing, and they will draw on their soil microbiome as needed, and then they have what they inherited from their seed. And that's really important when we think about farming, because of how it can impact that. Because similar to the gut microbiome, all the nutrient exchanges happening in that root system. Like, for example, we talk about compost is oftentimes coming from like animal manure. It's pretty much raw ammonia. And if you don't convert that to nitrate, nitrite, the plant actually cannot absorb it and it'll kill the plant. So literally these microorganisms are converting all these different nutrients into something usable that otherwise the plant would not survive. Similar with humans, a lot of what we are consuming is not digestible by the human. It's actually feeding our gut microbiome. And so I always tell people you should be focusing on feeding your gut microbiome more than your human cells, because it's less important. They're actually deciding a lot of our metabolic pathways. And so plants, it's similar. And that rhizosphere is also creating like a neural network, which is also what happens with our gut microbiome. It's really impacting a lot of our neurotransmitters and our neural network, and plants are similar. So all these signals are happening. And they've been able to show in recent studies that even plants can communicate through their air microbiome and soil microbiome stressors. So say there's a pest infestation on a plant next to another plant, they can already be communicating with that other plant, like, I'm going to die, but I'm going to help you survive, and I'm going to warn you, and you can start building up phytonutrients ahead of time so you can defend yourself to these pests. And that's
amazing.
Yeah. And that's what starts linking the plants to humans, is the phytonutrient load, because it is their main stress coping mechanism. We hear about any like superfoods and phytonutrient foods, and they usually, so phytonutrients are a stress coping mechanism for plants, and they manifest usually as color. That's why you've probably heard eat the rainbow.
Yes,
and it's actually really important. Yes.
Yes.
And that's because those are all this broad spectrum of phytonutrients, which actually the plants, it's a survival mechanism for the plants. And the more biodiversity they have in the soil, the more they can cope with stress, and they can have these beautiful, vibrant colors. And they've been able to show through studies that, you know, it's really, you have these more phytonutrient rich when they're grown organically and naturally. And again, it's usually that biodiversity driving that.
So interesting. I want to keep going on that to the farming, but I want to go back to something you said right in the beginning of all of that, which you mentioned that would sound interesting, but the air microbiome. That's fascinating. I have never heard that, but I do know a functional medicine doctor that, or functional nutrition doctor, whatever the official title is, but she talks about one of the things that she loves to do. She's like, I give everybody a hug because it's feeding my microbiome. And so, like, would that be why? Like, it's because of the air then? Just different people's...
I mean, you're literally, it is increasing your biodiversity. I mean, in something where you're touching someone physically, not only is your air microbiome interacting, your skin microbiome is interacting. And they're saying that it's really important to interact with other humans, with plants, with the soil, because you're starting to build up that. But every time you do that, you're building up your biodiversity. So like when they say have your kids play in the dirt, there's actually a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
There's even studies that have shown, there's some studies, amazing studies right now, showing that just directly inoculating PTSD patients with soil microbes, they've been able to show a transition and an improved response. So it will be a key factor in the future, not just our own gut microbiome, but the soil microbiome and how intimately connected it is to the human microbiome or holobiome.
Wow. And I feel like that gives more credence to also to the whole concept, like, we are built for relationship. We need people. We need that connection. That just gives an actual scientific reason for that beyond everything else that we can know and understand, and especially everything we've just been through, how important that is. And literally, physically, we need that to thrive and survive. So that's so interesting. Okay, so let's keep going with the farming then, because all of that just makes me think of so many questions, but maybe I'll just pose the big question then that you already led into it with organic farming, and just, I'm sure there's so much there then that needs to be done on the farming level. And then I know you talk about regenerative farming. So what is that, and what would be the best way to have these kinds of plants that are going to give the best phytonutrients and the best things for our holobiome?
Yeah, absolutely. So regenerative farming is all about regenerating the soil. So our average farms in the US have less than 2% soil organic matter, which means it's really close to dirt. The soil organic matter is the structure that the soil microbiome thrives on. So a lot of our farming practices are what are driving that and the degradation of our soil. They say we have about 30 harvests left of our soil in the US, and we won't have harvestable land anymore, which is really
Ooh.
terrifying. And you see it if you're a farmer, but it's very terrifying. So our farm we actually bought was a conventional corn farm. It just had no life to it. And so we regenerated it over 5 years. And every year you just see more and more diversity thriving. We have almost 200 different plants that we grow on the farm. But it's all about focusing on building back up that soil organic matter. And there's different practices we use for doing that. So we use no synthetic chemicals. You may use a few plant-derived chemicals, which are just other phytonutrients fighting pests. So you use the natural derived ones to work in your favor. And keeping the soil covered as much as possible. So we try to not till our fields once we really get them going. We try not to till, because tillage creates a lot of aeration. And think of these organisms as communities that are thriving together, and you disrupt that when you till the soil. So we try to do low till, low chemical use. And then we try to keep the ground covered, because Mother Nature, if you look, that's why there's weeds everywhere. It's always within, a few weeks, the ground is covered. And that's because the soil microbiome does not like to be exposed to sun and too much water. So this is intentionally farming to try to get that soil microbiome thriving, and to get and there's a lot of great reasons. It's also a carbon sink. We can sequester more carbon in soil than it'd be the lowest cost, most effective way to reverse climate change would be just regenerating our soil, because it's this huge carbon sink that could just suck all that back into the environment. And every bit of soil organic matter we bring back also retains more water. So you get rid of a lot of your issues with watering and overuse of water. So just a lot of benefits beyond just the soil microbiome, but environmental impacts as well. So if you have this healthy, thriving microbiome, you also have these healthy, thriving plants. They can respond to the stressors around them. They can create high phytonutrient, essentially nutrient-dense foods.
Interesting. So you said it took you about 5 years to get this farm, the dirt to thriving soil. Would that be dependent? I'm just thinking of other farms or like people that have their own backyard garden. What would be the things that what are the things that you did to have that become thriving soil?
Yeah, so we add a lot of compost. So part of what compost is it adds soil organic matter back to the soil, but two, it adds a lot of biodiversity. So we use 3 types of composting. We use vermicomposting. So worms have incredible microbiome diversity. They really help get that environment like thriving. They aerate the soil in an appropriate way, so not over aerating it. And they provide incredible nutrient exchange as well. Then we do windrow, which is your typical just row piles, and you're turning them over until they hit a certain temperature, and then it kills all the bad organisms and it helps the other ones thrive. And then we do Johnson-Su compost bioreactors, which creates like a super inoculant, and it's like a 1-year process that you just kind of leave it alone, let it just build up this biodiversity, and then you use it as an inoculant. So we use things like that to build up the soil organic matter and the biodiversity. And then we plant different crops. So monocropping is not good for building diversity in the soil either. And so we like to have a lot of perennial plants that are building up the soil. They're good for also the native pollinators, which is a different story. We don't have time to talk about.
I know,
but those are down. 90% insect biomass is down in our world right now, which is also a whole nother cycle.
Yes.
But so we're doing that. We're building up that biodiversity also by having different plants. And then, like I said, we keep the ground covered. That's really important because it protects the soil. So you want to treat soil really delicate, and we're really hard on it.
So, okay. So a couple of things there. So you say keep the ground covered. So covered with what?
You can cover it with mulching. You can cover it with straw, bark, different things. You don't want it too close to the plant because it can create a nitrogen barrier, but you can do it with other plant matter. A lot of regenerative farms will use like barley. They'll let it grow and then they crimp it down and it creates this beautiful like straw bed that you plant right into. And then just even leaving the root base of other plants in the ground. When we harvest, if it's not a root crop, we try to just snip it at the base and leave that nice root mass in the ground so those colonies kind of stay put and continue to thrive.
Interesting. And then you said, so, and it's funny because I was going to ask you about rotating crops. So then how do you do that? Is it like every year you're planting a different plant in that area, or every couple of years? How do you
Yes.
rotate?
And so that's required for organic, is that you have to rotate every year to keep the pest
Every
pressure
year.
down,
Okay.
because the pests will find you. And so you have to really move your crops around. Other than perennial crops, obviously you leave alone, those stay in the ground, and they're meant to have that more permanent. And we do rows that are dedicated to pollinator plants. Like every 10 to 15 rows will have like echinacea or something, where it's great for pollinators, but it also builds up that soil microbiome within that row like really intensely. Those can grow like 3 feet deep roots, which is great for the soil.
Interesting. And then what is aquaponic farming, and why is that important?
So we brought that's for our indoor farming. We wanted something that was also sustainable indoors. So that uses
Okay.
fish to actually create a liquid
Ah,
fertilizer. Like I said, that ammonia, which is fish waste. We
interesting.
actually have a biofilter, which is a natural bacterial filter that builds up in the system and does that denitrification and allows the plants to actually uptake that. And then the plants filter the water, and then the fish have clean water. So it's this incredible symbiotic system between fish and the plants, and they grow really fast. They're very nutrient dense, and people don't realize it's actually not a new technology. It goes back as far as the
Yeah.
Aztecs.
Wow.
So yeah, it's thousands of years old, and they used to do it in big ponds. And so it's just something, a lot of regenerative farming is just bringing back what I call heritage farming, that
Hmm.
we almost inherently knew, thousands of years ago, and then we lost it.
Yeah, exactly. That is so interesting. I did not know fish were involved in aquaponic farming. That's fascinating. So, is it just is it just one big system that they just swim back and forth in that system, or are they kind of separate pods that they have? I'm
So we
curious
have,
about that.
yeah, they're like big, huge circular tanks. So fish like to
Okay.
swim kind of they like to always obviously be in motion, and they swim kind of circular. So you need pretty big tanks. And then those go into what we call deep water beds, which are essentially just plants floating on that water. And then we have vertical, which are ebb and flow, which just have trickles of water. And we do that with our seedlings. Even for outside, a lot of our seedlings are started indoors just to get them going.
Interesting. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Okay, we are running out of time. We only have a couple minutes left in this first segment that flew by. Is there anything else that you want to add about the connection, about the holobiome, about the regenerative farming that we might have missed?
No, I mean, I think the key thing is just even not just how the food's grown, but then how it's processed and how it's used by our body, because then that's the human holobiome that starts working in our favor, and it's heavily linked as well.
Yes. And I'm excited because that is the perfect segue into what we're going to talk about in the next segment, is about that connection, because of the base that we just laid, the foundation that we just laid about the soil and about that connection. Then therefore what we eat has a profound impact on our health. And so we are definitely going to get into that and how you discovered that, about your personal journey to that point, and learning about that connection and what a difference that can make in our health. So that is amazing. This is an amazing conversation, and we are going to take a quick break, and we are going to come back with Jennifer Maynard and talk about all these things about the connection between the plants that we eat and our health. So you are listening to Moms for Wellness on SM Enlightenment Radio and TV, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Moms for Wellness on SM Enlightenment Radio and TV. And I am here with my guest, Jennifer Maynard, and we just wrapped up an amazing conversation on the Holobiome. And now we are going to get into Jennifer's personal story and what led her into this fascinating world of soil and the biodiversity and the connection of that to our health. And so, Jennifer, I would love to hear a little bit about your story because you really do have a fascinating journey, one that started steeped in science. Well, actually, before that, you just started in off the Pure Land, and then science, and then travel to other countries that led you to a different perspective on food and our food sources. So actually, I was going to start with your career, but maybe even start it back to where you grew up, because I think it had a pretty amazing impact on you overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a small fishing village in Alaska, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we lived in a tiny cabin, no running water, just very much in the raw. But we really lived off of the land. And I would say I was very privileged. I think a lot of people are like, well, you grew up super poor and you had nothing, but it's not true. We had nature all around us and we were never deprived of healthy food. And so we fished salmon pretty much year round, like the best salmon on the planet. And then we foraged and we grew a good share of our fruits and vegetables, mainly vegetables, but my mom canned and preserved things, and we lived a very natural lifestyle. So I think it was really pivotal for my upbringing to have that good foundation. Then we moved to Southern California, which was a very big difference. And then you're exposed to, all these fast food chains. And, it's funny because my mom would make us lunches because she was horrified with the school food lunch, food. And we'd be like, we just want to be like the rest of the kids.
Yes.
And so eventually, like, she broke down and was like, here, fine. And for about 2 weeks, we tried it. And then we're like, can you make us lunches again? So, I was very lucky in that sense because I was early on exposed to it and exposed to nature and soil and all these things. And then, I went through a personal journey. I lost my uncle to HIV/AIDS. It's what moved me into the healthcare industry because there was no standard of care. And so at that time, and so I wanted to make a difference there. And I think that I'm not an anti-farmer person. I think it has its place, but I feel like we overuse it. And that's where after 20 years, I was like, look, I love what I do. I work in oncology, ophthalmology, hematology, all the different ologies. And I worked in other countries and it was a great experience. But I just was looking around, you mentioned, so I worked in a lot of other countries. So I spent 3 years in Germany, 3 years in Switzerland. I worked a lot in Japan, Australia, all over South Africa. And so you see how a lot of other countries live, and there's pros and cons to every single place out there. But the thing that probably stood out the most is the food system and how much more a lot of other countries even protect their consumers from like Europe. Even when my kids first moved there, they were like, this ketchup tastes really strange. And it's because they don't allow high fructose corn syrup in most of their products. So my family doesn't drink soda, but a lot of our relatives do. And they're like, this soda's so flat. And I was like, because it's sugar. It's real sugar. It's not high fructose corn syrup. So just like little things like the sauces, not having that. When we first moved there, and I thought I was a pretty healthy individual, but when we moved there, everything tasted super bland. And then after a few months, you start tasting the incredible flavors in all your food. And it was amazing because when I'd go back to the US to just visit family, I wouldn't feel very good. And I'd like, this food is so salty and so much sugar. And like, I'd eat a cupcake at a birthday, which I don't eat a ton of stuff like that. But, if I went to a birthday party, I'd eat a cupcake and I couldn't even finish like a bite. It hit me so hard because I had been kind of weaned off of all those sugar addictions just by the environment I was around. So it's just not like you have all these bakeries with these incredible pastries and stuff, but they just aren't stacked with as much processed ingredients. And then everyone walks everywhere, which was a big, I was always a runner and stuff, but just walking to and from your different shops and things, like everyone walks everywhere. So between the low impact exercise and the nutrition, it completely changed my health and my way of looking at things, even for my children, because the school lunches were we were so spoiled. The school lunches were like the healthiest food. And I was like, why can't we have
Wow.
this in the US? So
Exactly.
eventually, like, I decided I have to do this. I have to change my career path and take the
Hmm.
science to make nutrition a higher priority in the US, not just for the parents of children to give that access to that healthy food, but also in our school systems. Like my daughter,
Mm.
every once in a while, will be
Yes.
like, "Can I have the school lunch?" And I remember feeling that way when I was a kid. So I
Yes.
her, and then she comes home and her stomach's like gurgling. She's like, my tummy hurts. Um,
Yep.
so I just think we have to start changing this. And so my mission really shifted to not just medicine, but food as medicine. And what's amazing
Mm.
is our father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, has one of the most famous quotes, let food be thy medicine and
Yes.
medicine be thy food. And that was our mission for our company is let medicine be thy food, because and reverse. And it really is, when we start really digging into epigenetics, it is amazing how spot on those statements are. Because we realize we can flex our DNA. We realize that it's so much more about our environment, meaning our food, our toxin exposure, our exercise, than even the genetics that we inherit from our parents.
Yeah.
So to me, that was just amazing. And it's been this incredible journey ever since then.
That's amazing. So fascinating. Oh my goodness, there's so many things in there. But I want to start with epigenetics since you mentioned that for the second time. Can you just give a quick definition of what that is for someone that's listening, just like, okay, I don't know what that is.
Yes. Okay. So what we've realized is that our DNA is really flexible and we can actually flex how we manifest our DNA. So say, for example, your predisposition to a certain disease, so you inherit a genetic biomarker. We're realizing that you can actually shift if your body manifests that or not.
Mm.
Or maybe you're not predispositioned, but you're not eating a healthy lifestyle, you can actually increase that. So like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, we're realizing 80% of that is lifestyle impacted, not genetics.
Wow.
Even over half of different cancers. Cancer a lot can be impacted by toxins, which even if you eat healthy nutrition, you can't always avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
So those are environmental exposures as well. But the fact that we can impact so much with nutrition and lifestyle is just incredible. And that's really, again, shifting. I've heard of it. The explanation I love is like shifting the track of a train. So you
Mm.
have a train going down this path, and maybe it's not the healthiest track that you're going down. You can actually shift tracks and
Hmm.
switch over to a healthier track, and you can actually take your genetics with you. So it's not like I'm
Interesting.
stuck on this track.
Yeah.
I inherited these genetics. I'm just stuck with what I have. You can shift those tracks and you can go, nope, I'm living a different lifestyle. And we work with the Mayo Clinic. We work with all these different research groups that also understand that. And they're making nutrition such an important part of their
Mm.
treatment regimens. Because even if you already are in a disease state like cancer or type 2 diabetes or hypertension, you can still shift it.
Mm.
It's really something that even after you're in that, and if you look at how the holobiome fits into that, is
Mm-hmm.
it's controlling those signals. And if you have a symbiotic relationship and it's all in balance, you have reductions in your oxidative stress. So your body's responding to that oxidation and it's repairing your DNA. You also have really good mucosal lining, which is a
Mm-hmm.
protective layer of your body. And then you have this really good response with your digestion system and your nutrient exchange, and everything's kind of working together. When you start to eat, for example, really highly processed foods, and you start to get in some of these vicious cycles with craving more and more of those foods, you start to actually shift your microbiome to um, less diversity. So the biggest thing is
Mm-hmm.
diversity. So your body starts liking these oils and these processed foods, and you start to actually lose some of your biodiversity, or antibiotics, things like that, like excessive
Yep.
use of some of these different chemicals, because it's the same as
Mm-hmm.
pesticides in soil or
Yeah.
herbicides in soil. So it impacts your body in a similar way, where you now have shrunk all your biodiversity, you lose that balance, and all of a sudden you have oxidative stress, you have inflammation in the body. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, instead of just temporary inflammation, because temporary inflammation is okay, your body has all the
Right.
mechanisms to clear it
Yes.
out. But when it's chronic, that's what creates
That's
chronic
the problem.
disease. So it's heavily correlated to over 80% of the chronic illnesses out there are correlated to that imbalance that happens
Amazing.
in our holobiome.
Amazing. And I feel like that message right there that you just said, I feel like that cannot be said loud enough. That cannot be said enough time or too many times. Like it just needs to be shouted from the rooftops, because I think I think it's a very difficult mindset shift for us as Americans, because I know my first run in with that, I was like, well, that's strange. Oh, that's odd. Like you can change XYZ, like lots of different things, and lots of conversations with people. Like you can change it by your eating. Like that's weird. Can't you just take a pill? Isn't there medicine for it? And I feel like the mindset of Americans is a very difficult thing to shift, and a different thing to change. And I just look at your story, which is amazing. But it took going to and experiencing life in other countries and feeling that difference, and like, why is that different in the US? And so I'm curious, with obviously you are fighting the fight and you have found a niche in this, but I'm curious what you see as being the most difficult thing to change, or what the most difficult part of this change is in what you have experienced or seen so far.
Yeah. So I think in the US, the hardest thing is the amount of exposure and marketing and things of the unhealthy foods. So there's a doctor out there that is in lifestyle medicine, just an incredible individual. And he says he analyzed the typical grocery store in the US, and you have 98 poor choices to make. So it's really hard when you only have 2% of good options, right? So, I mean, I have some rules that I picked up, but just to put it in perspective, even in Germany and Switzerland and a lot of the countries that I traveled to, just the train station, like convenience stores, are mainly produce stands. And that is a big difference from in the US, like, your typical convenience store. You don't see any produce. Like you're lucky if you can find a banana. And so that's one thing that the cards are stacked against us in the US, and I think that's just wrong. And I feel like it's starting to shift. We had the first White House conference in 50 years on nutrition just 2 weeks ago, so that's exciting. It's hopefully the right step forward.
Yes.
But we have a long way to go, and so I think that's number one: is surround yourself with tons of fruits and vegetables. I know some vegans that are Seventh-day Adventists, and I've been to their house, and they just have bowls of fruit and vegetables out on all their counters. So like, and then after dinner, they put out a bowl of fruit. Like everything is just exposing people to it. Like my children, I've done a few things to kind of not trick them, but to get them excited about vegetables. For one, they grow a lot of their own vegetables, so that's huge. Get your kids, even if it's just a tomato plant on your patio, get your kids involved with that, get their hands dirty. But two, I created a competition because my kids, like, whether I like it or not, they compete about everything. So I was like, okay, you each get to pick 2 different vegetables that you want, and you can pick the best one, and then we'll make it. And so they're like, mine's better. And I'm like, you know what? If this is what they're competing about, awesome. Like,
that's awesome. I love that. Best tip of the night.
Yeah. And then I just try to get a lot of colors on their plate, and I don't make them eat everything, but I try to get them to at least eat 2 different vegetables every single day. And like, you got to pick your battles, but I think the more you expose them, even if they turn it down, it's like, keep exposing them. And now my daughter, like, it's sometimes hard with family members because they come and they're like, she wanted a bowl of ice cream. And I was like, well, did you offer her strawberries or carrot sticks first? And they're like, oh, no. So I think it's really just, you have to shift your mindset. And it's hard because, so like, having coaches, having a community of friends that, you start to, I know at first, like, my friends were like, oh, Jennifer's going to bring the salad to the party. Like, Jennifer's party's over with the salad. And I'm like, but over time, everyone started bringing healthier things. And it's not that we deprived ourselves from other goodies and stuff, but you just start getting more of that into your diet. Like my father-in-law with the diabetes, type 2 diabetes, it was a big shift that he had to make. But I was like, look, just start by putting an extra serving of vegetables on your plate every day. And that's easy for anyone to do. And what people don't realize is you can shift your taste buds in 2 weeks, 100% complete changeover of your taste buds. So I always tell people, just stick with it for 2 weeks, push through the kale and some of the other things you may not love, because we get people that eat our meals and after 2 weeks, they're like, I never would have said I liked kale, but somehow I do. because your body starts craving it. You change all these vicious
Yeah.
cycles, because it's horrible, the cycles we get our body in. Leptin resistance, which makes us crave more foods, and we get into these obesity cycles, ghrelin cycles, like insulin resistant cycles. Our body is telling us, like, I'm stuck in this cycle, how do I get out? And it takes a big change sometimes to be able to shift out of those cycles. So it's just a lot of education and awareness, but more than anything, it's just getting more vegetables. Only 1 in 10 Americans gets enough fruits and vegetables in their diet, only 1 in 10. And that's mainly linked to the fiber. So I always tell people, remember, you're feeding 99% of your cells are bacterial cells, and they eat a different food source than you do. And it's mainly vegetables and high fiber vegetables. So, you know, they directly, yeah.
Oh, now I was going to say, that's such a great perspective, like a great way to see it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Think of yourself as a super organism. I mean, I think that's an awesome name anyway, but you're the super organism.
We're going to make t-shirts, super organisms. I love it. There's a project for all the moms out there. Make super organism t-shirts for you and your family. Halloween, you know, next time Halloween comes around, it's coming up, you know, as we're recording this. So there you go. You can be the super organism family. I love it. Have you ever done that for your family? That would be a good costume for you guys.
Wait, oh, my kids will love that. They're like, great, Mom, you're not big enough to work. You got to do that too.
That's awesome. That is such amazing ideas and advice for us as moms, for ways that we can lead our families into healthy habits, and just that encouragement of even just starting small, and just how quickly our taste buds can change is just very encouraging advice. And just start introducing one new vegetable, you know, when you go shopping, and be like, oh, I haven't tried this one. I don't know what bok choy is. Let me figure out what to do with that. And, you know, and just add one in, and just don't have it be such an overwhelming thing. I think is really great. And one quick question about that, and I want to talk about what Nutrition for Longevity offers. But it also makes me think of the food pyramid, and you've mentioned school and school lunches and a lot of things like that. But my understanding of what the food pyramid is and what we've been taught is not exactly what it probably should be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it literally has a lot of times the processed foods in there, and our bodies were not designed for these processed foods. They're too dense in processed oils and processed sugars, and our body just can't take the concentration that we're giving it. It needs all the fiber. I mean, any really good dietitian you talk to says, you know, they have this PFF, protein, fat, and fiber should always go along with a carb. And that's because, and really the biggest thing is the fiber, because it slows the release of the sugars. And so I think that, again, is just mission critical to always, I mean, that's going to feed your gut microbiome. They need prebiotic, probiotic fibers. Like, it's really, really critical. And most people aren't giving them enough.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Okay, so tell me what medically tailored nutrition is. I have never heard this phrase before.
Yes. So at Nutrition for Longevity, we follow the longevity diet, which is really, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so high in carbs, but it's mainly vegetables. So keep in mind, vegetables are carbs, but you have simple carbs, complex carbs. We have the ones that are complex and have more fiber to them. So they're not heavily processed. They're whole food, plant forward. And that's the foundation. And then what we do for medically tailored meals is we shift the macronutrients and sometimes the ingredients for a specific medical indication, like type 2 diabetes or renal kidney disease. And so there's leading guidelines, and then there's Dr. Longo's science that says, you know, this is the best ratio for this person to eat of different foods. And these foods need to be removed from the diet because of these sensitivities. And so that's kind of the makeup. And we support 36 different medical indications, but we also do prevention. So Dr. Longo just released a study that shows if you eat like the longevity diet, which is based on his 30 years of research of essentially the blue zones, or the longevity regions of the world, where you have the highest concentration of people that live past 100, so centenarians. And they eat, what's incredible is they eat different foods, but the exact same macronutrient profile. So that's what he has created the longevity diet with. And it's actually lower protein than most people eat. We actually eat about 50 grams too much protein in the US. Everyone's obsessed with protein, but we're getting too much of it in most cases. Yeah. And then it's got healthy fats. So it's a little more fat than some people are used to, but not an overage. It's not keto or anything like that. And then really high fruits and vegetables. Like I tell people the biggest like takeaway is we're used to in the US this huge slab of meat on our plates, and then a side, you even call it a side of
Yeah,
vegetables.
side of
That's like
vegetables.
usually like a half serving of vegetables. And I'm like, what? And it's like coated in butter and salt.
Yes.
And I tell people to flip that, you know, if you're going to have meat, you know, have this huge healthy serving of all these vegetables and healthy grains, and then a tiny piece of protein. That's enough, adequate, but not an overage. And so we just try to start to flip that. And the medically tailored meals are mainly plant-forward meals, like the one that we're doing research with the Mayo Clinic. It's an oil-free, fully whole food plant-based diet. And they're seeing incredible responsiveness with cancer patients on those types.
Wow.
I mean, multiple studies showing that. And it's low inflammation, and it's feeding your gut microbiome and your overall body.
Yeah, that's amazing. And are those medically tailored nutrition meals, is that something that you partner with places like hospitals and different organizations, or is that something that the average person can go to your website and get?
So both. So our e-commerce site, what our typical clients go to is nutritionforlongevity.com. Our medically tailored meals are on nforallhealth.com. And we typically partner with insurance providers. So a lot of people don't know it's a medical benefit. If you have one of those 36 chronic illnesses, there's a good chance your insurance company actually pays for our meals and even our dietitian consultation. So you can get free support from a coach, a dietitian, and you can oftentimes get the meals covered. So that's something that we offer on our nforallhealth.com site.
Nice. That is amazing. And then if I'm not necessarily having any specific issue, but I want to go and see what you can offer, do you have something just for the average person that's just looking to have more plants in their meals, or just looking for a healthy meal? So explain what you offer.
Yeah. So we offer vegan, fully vegan, gluten-free. We offer pescatarian, so that's with fish, so vegan plus fish. And then we offer flexitarian, which is vegan plus poultry. Those are fully macro-balanced meals, so you don't have to worry about getting the right amount of protein or fat or any of that. And it's void of refined sugars, and it's low in salt. And so everything's kind of in that way controlled, and it's all minimally processed. And a lot of the produce is coming from our own farm or local farms around us. And that's really important for us because we want high quality, minimally processed food that doesn't have all these additives and preservatives and fillers and things like that. And it's following those macronutrient profiles. So Longo just published a study that if you started that diet at age 20, you can add about 12 to 14 years of health span to your life. And if you start at age 60, you can still add 7 to 8 years of health span to your life. So it's not a small amount. Like people think,
that's amazing.
It's gonna like make me feel a little bit better, but we're like, well, it could actually have a really dramatic impact. And for us, it's not about living longer. Like I don't necessarily aspire to live to 100. What I aspire is to have a good health span, which means that optimal time in my life that I have good mobility and good cognitive ability, that I extend that as long as I can. And so that's what's the most important. And we do really specialty diets. Like we're launching a dementia protocol towards the end of this year that is actually shown to reverse components of dementia. And we're working that with a specific doctor that's done all that research. So we do highly tailored meals. That's our specialty.
That's amazing. Simply amazing. I think it's phenomenal. And I feel like this is just the beginning, because it sounds like you have so many other things that you can tailor meals for, and just the research and the science to back it up, which I think is just amazing. But it's pure food and produce, straight from the farm. So I think that's phenomenal. So can you tell us your website again and how people can reach out to you if they want more information?
Yes. So it's nutritionforlongevity.com. You can go on and look at our normal ones, or you could go on nforallhealth.com if you're interested in the medically tailored meals for yourself or a loved one, to see if they get insurance coverage or FSA, HSA benefits, or just pay cash out of pocket. And then we do have a coupon code for our nutritionforlongevity.com site, and that's MOMS20 for 20% off your first 2 orders. So you can also try it and see if you like it. Get through that first 2 weeks of a taste bud reset, and then you'll start to really love the kale and the different components.
Yes. Yay for kale.
You can pick what meals you want. So we have like more comfort foods that are, even if they're vegan, they're really tasty, or we have like really kind of more exotic stuff, because most of our dishes are inspired by the longevity regions. So you'll see stuff inspired by Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, and Okinawa, Japan.
Amazing. Well, Jennifer Maynard, thank you so much for being my guest today. I have learned so much, and this has been so informative and helpful. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on SM Enlightenment Radio or TV, or joining me on the Moms for Wellness podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Moms for Wellness podcast and leave a 5-star rating or review. It really is helpful, and we would be so grateful. I'm Jenny. Have a good one.